Welcome back to Volume 33 of Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories. We last left the captain. He was moving to Lockport, Louisiana. Got him a new home on a little cockeyed lot. So, take it away, Cap.
Well, the lot was straight. It was the house that was cockeyed, sitting on the lot. It looked a little strange, but, you know, the guy was... I bought the house... I paid off the what the mortgage company wanted, and gave him a couple of $1,000, and so he made out, and I made out, because it was a pretty good bargain. But I was starting a brand new venture here, and I drove down, leaving my house. I used to go down through downtown Lockport, which took about, I don't know if it was a whole minute or not, and then get to this little Bascule Bridge and cross over Bayou Lafourche, and then go down the other side of the canal till I got down to Bollinger Shipyard. And that was the main office. And my job there was, Bollinger built these tugs, some fairly decent tugs, and they built some barges and stuff. And there was a small, don't want to say intercoastal, because they was actually off of the intercoastal in Bayou Lafourche. Excuse me. But they built these boats and barges, and there was a bunch of brothers that worked there. There was Donald Bollinger. He was the president of the whole thing and the ramrod of the whole place. And then he had his brothers working for him. He had Dickie Bollinger that worked in the machine shop at the, and George Bollinger, which he worked as general construction around there. And then they had Donald's sister had married this guy named Pappy Boyd, who was in the barge leasing business. And so, but they had all got together and they decided to form this little towboat company, pushing the boats and barges, because people was always coming in there and trading stuff into them for a newer model, or getting so they ended up with a lot of extra equipment, which they would try to sell. And if they couldn't sell it, they would put it into B&B Towing Company, and they would use it and operate it, put crews on it, and tow cargo. So they had about 12 of these boats that all the brothers shared in the ownership of this thing, and the brother-in-law. And so my job was operations manager for this company. Now, operations manager, it was, well, you're only as good as the people you got. And I went in there, and they had really no organization of who does what, who's responsible for what. You know, they had this guy named Jim Westbrook, which was one of these thinks he knows everything about the boat business because he knows how to sell equipment and lease equipment out. He was the vice president of sales of the company, and I came in as vice president of operations. Before that, he really didn't. He ran everything, so he didn't really care that much that I was there. But I came in, and then I found my office. They had this, when you're coming down the Bayou Lafourche and you turn in, there was an old loft. It was actually called what they call a mole loft originally, where they laid down pieces of wood patterns and cut steel patterns out from these wood patterns, and they would make different parts of a barge or a tug. But anyway, they decided they were going to give B&B an office in there. Now Westbrook, he had an office across the parking lot, which the parking lot was made out of shells, oyster shells, you know. And so he was over in the main building, and I was over in the opposite side. And we had a small office, which at the time I got there was just a couple of desks, and everybody hung out in there. Well, I immediately had to do something, so I built a petition in there and gave myself a private office in the back. Private phone, private this, you know. And I started kind of sizing up the guys that were working for me. And believe it or not, it was some great guys. They just weren't, they had no direction. So I took this one guy, his name was Ben Bro. And Ben was the kind of guy, he could drive a boat. He could fix an engine. He could do just about anything you want, you know. So I made him port captain. And then I hired this one guy's name, Charlie Thibodeau, and made him the crew driver, because our crews would come into the office, and then we would put them in a van or something and take them down to the boats to make a crew change. And most of them worked like 14 days on, and then they would be like about 4 or 5 days off. So we was constantly doing that. So then we had I can't remember the guy's name that was a radio operator. He was a constant radio operator, because in those days the only communication you had with these boats was what they called single sideband, and it was a really long range signal of equipment that the voice was distorted, but the signals would bounce off the atmosphere and back down. And you know, to make a long story short, you know, you had certain times that was yours that you could get on there and listen for your boat and find out the position. So that was this guy's job, and I can't remember his name, God bless him. But then I had Albert Loop. Now Albert, he was the personnel guy. He would interview these deckhands, get these crews and get these crews ready to send them to the boat. So he handled all the personnel. Albert was a character, boy. I liked Albert. He was, and at the time we was living in Lockport, they had some old lady that was running for the justice of the peace, and Albert would come in and says, "Can you believe that woman?" He says, "Man," he says, "she is as big a crook as you ever saw in your life." And I said, "Well, Albert," I says, what do you think you ought to do about it?" He said, "Somebody needs to run against her." And I says, "Well, run against her." I said, "I'll get on your campaign and everything." He said, "She is a crook." So Albert did run against her and won. And to make a long story short, after Albert had been in there 5 or 6 months, he started telling me about all these kickbacks and things he was getting. He says, "Man, I get this much money a month for holding the flag for the kids, and I don't even have to go." He says, "You know," I said, "Well, Albert," I says, "isn't this the same thing you accused her of doing? Aren't you getting the same thing that she was getting?" And he said, "Well, Harold," he said, "you got to look at it like this way, man." He said, "I'm going to get elected next time." And that was kind of Louisiana politics, you know. So I was settled in, and we once a week we had a board meeting. We'd go over. Donald's his house was right across the street. This beautiful home, swimming pool, everything, you know, right across the street from the office and all that. We'd go over there for a board meeting, and so all the brothers would be in there, and Jim Westbrook would be in there, and I would be in there. They would bring us all, order poor boys sandwiches, whatever kind of sandwiches. We start off by eating these big Louisiana poor boy, French bread, real French bread, real sandwiches. And then we'd go through the meetings, you know, and so, you know, I'd tell them what was going on. They was happy, I was happy. I was getting some crews, you know, I had kind of organized everything around there. And
okay, Cap, we'll wrap it up. That's in volume 33, and we'll come back and finish the story in volume 34 of Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories.